So I'm the daughter of immigrants who came to this country as newlyweds from a very poor country. And this country made the American dream real for them, for my whole family, for my whole extended family. And I grew up with the sense of appreciation of that. And I grew up kind of knowing that I wanted to do my part. And this is my first stint in government. I didn't work in government before coming to the administration, but I've learned that the skills that you use as an advocate, as an analyst of policy, as someone who's trying to make a difference outside of government are pretty applicable to what happens in government. And I've learned working with cities and towns in this country for 3 years now how incredibly important it is to be surrounded by people who want to serve, to be surrounded by people who are really committed to making change and moving things forward for their communities, for their neighbors, and it's a huge honor to be connected to that.
For me, it started volunteering at a homeless shelter in college, where I really found a passion for serving people, and also, to me, it connected to a childhood growing up in New York, where New York was really, literally on the edge of falling apart. Many of these SC2 cities have seen devastation on a scale that is unique, and are on their way back, are recovering, and I'm inspired by my own experience in New York City growing up that got me interested in homelessness and housing. And I remember one particular moment. I had been teaching a class as a teaching assistant with a great professor named Robert Coles, and we were reading Invisible Man. And I had literally just walked out of the classroom with my students and was walking through Harvard Square, and stopped and sort of picked my head up and realized I'd noticed something that I hadn't really seen. And I looked back, and there was an elderly African-American man not holding a sign. The only thing he had with him was a picture of himself decades earlier in his uniform. And it just struck me that here was my invisible man. This was a man who the only way he could communicate to people that he wasn't invisible, that he could be seen, was to hold a picture of himself decades before as a soldier. And I always carry that memory with me when I think about who we serve and what we do in public service, which is really about making the invisible in our society visible. Giving them voice, giving them help, making them part of the society, the democratic society that we all think is the ideal, but too often isn't the reality in our society. And that's what often has motivated me toward service. For me, having started at the federal level in government, that was my first public service experience. I then went to work at the local level, and now I've come back to federal service. And what I've realized is that local government experience is invaluable, because you understand, you touch and you feel what's happening on the ground. You get to know the issues. You get to understand the way all of our federal policies, which can seem like just rules and regulations or words on a page, you understand what they really mean to people when you work at the local level. So for me, it's that experience of sort of coming back to federal government has really taught me, ironically, how important local government experience is.
Well, and this is really where governing, kind of where the rubber meets the road. The fellows who come into this program are going to have this huge learning opportunity to get a feel for how the federal government interacts with local governments, but also to be on the ground in some of the great cities of this country. But cities that have faced real challenges, but to be part of the city team as well as the federal government team, figuring out how all this is going to work, how they're going to be working across the kinds of boundaries that usually come up to really move things forward. It's an extraordinary opportunity, and these fellows are going to learn so much.
The world has really changed so much in terms of local and state government being leaders of policies. There's much more flexibility and really looking to partners at the local level for innovation, for trying new things. And I certainly felt when I was working in local government that many of the things I'm proudest of were ideas that came from other places, or that once they were working in New York, we shared with other places. And I always felt like the federal government was a missing partner. What we're trying to do now at the federal government is to make the federal government a partner once again, but to do it in a way that really recognizes local leadership.
Yeah, to me, the Strong Cities, Strong Communities program, the genius of it is that it kind of gets the governing relationship right, and that it's really being driven by what's going on locally. But with federal support, the federal government should be a catalyst, a helper, kind of helping make things happen and move things forward. But the real energy, the ideas are really coming from local leadership.
This is really about re-envisioning what the federal government should be. And I think what we're trying to do is reimagine what does a strong federal role look like in a very different frame, which is supporting local vision, not imposing a vision, but saying what is the vision of the local community? How is it different in Detroit versus Cleveland versus Memphis versus Fresno? All of these different places. New Orleans each of them has to have its own unique vision for a local community. How can we support that rather than push them in a particular direction? And so I think it's a unique opportunity for any fellow to be really at the ground floor, if you will, on creating a new kind of city-federal relationship.
These fellows are going to have a front row seat to some of the great leadership moments going on in this country, and some of the great cities of this country, but cities facing some of the biggest challenges that we face. But there is real leadership going on in these places like Detroit and New Orleans and Fresno, and it's happening on both sides of the political aisle. I mean, I've learned working with mayors when I was Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for 3 years, you don't really see ideological differences when you're governing at this level. It's, these are folks dealing with, transit and housing and the stuff that actually affects people's lives day in and day out. It's much less about ideology and much more about what matters to people every day. And these fellows are going to have a front row seat to some exciting stuff.
What we're really looking for here is the best and the brightest. Those who want to take experiences that they've had, at least a few years working in something related to housing and community development, at least a university degree, hopefully a graduate degree, connected to the focus of this work in housing and community development. But we're looking for somebody who's a special kind of talent, right? Who's somebody who can take an entrepreneurial spirit into local government, because these are places that are reinventing themselves, that are looking to do things in new ways.
So I would say the folks who should apply for this program are people who are in love with doing, in love with the possibilities of America's cities, and who are really interested in learning the nuts and bolts of kind of what it takes to be governing at this level and to be working in partnership with communities at this level, because these fellows are going to be working not just with city government and the federal government. They're also going to be working with stakeholders outside of the government. There's a lot of community outreach that's inherent in these positions. So we're looking for folks who are interested in all of that range of experience.
And I have to say, Celia, you in particular and others at the White House have been such leaders on bringing the federal government kind of into the 21st century, if you will, of how communities work. That it isn't any longer about government doing it alone, whether it's the White House Office of Social Innovation or a whole range, the work that we've done with foundations. It's just been remarkable to watch from where I sit, to see the leadership you've provided in bringing all those pieces together. And I think SC2 is a great example of how we're bringing those practices to 7 different cities around the country in a very, very real way. So it really is part of this broader effort we've made in the Obama administration to connect the federal government into innovation that's happening with nonprofits, with philanthropies, with the private sector, in a way that's very, very exciting to me. First of all, I just have to say, having the support of the Rockefeller Foundation for anything that you do in the public sector and the private sector is a huge seal of approval. And Judy Roden and her entire team, their leadership is legendary in terms of the work that's done. And in fact, Judy herself, when she was leading the University of Pennsylvania, set up a terrific program to bring students and early career folks into public service in a range of places. So she really, for her to be supporting this effort, I think is a great example of her own leadership being extended. And I think having the Rockefeller Foundation on board means that this is something that's going to last. It's going to be an effort that spans beyond the Obama administration, beyond the administration of any of these particular mayors. It's a long-term commitment to making sure that there's dedication to public service in these places. By having the German Marshall Fund, by having the universities engaged, they're going to make sure, their role is to make sure that this is more than just an individual experience in an individual place. It's connected to the experiences of all the other fellows in other places. And it's going to make it a hell of a lot more fun. It's also just going to make it a much deeper experience, a richer experience in terms of learning from each other. And I think having that connection to a classroom environment as well is to make sure that not only are the fellows learning from each other, they're also learning from the best and the brightest in terms of those who teach about these issues in universities, and universities that are grounded in those places.
What's really wonderful about the participation from philanthropy in this program is, it sends an important signal that everybody needs to be involved in this, that it's not just about what government does, but it's also, we need expertise from every sector, we need engagement from every sector. I think it sends a strong signal to communities that this is something that where the door is open for all kinds of participation, and philanthropy, I think, helps open the door to other kinds of participation as well.